when the red snapper RFP came out, it was fairly specific about a synoptic effort. Was there any talk in the steering committee about fixing the years? Do they want a current, only the current years, or the back years, or it can be some mix of it? But, you know, obviously with red snapper, we defined it as 2018 and did most of the field work in 2018. Is that similar, or it seems like there's more leeway?
Well, I think the intent, and again, I won't pretend to be a fisheries scientist, amberjack expert, but, you know, I do think the one-time estimate of absolute abundance, I'm not sure how you would define that, if it's over multiple years or how you go, or 1 year. You know, other members of the steering committee or project team, please jump in and answer that. We never talked about over multiple years though, Sean, on the steering committee, I can say that.
Okay.
You know, the one thing that's in there that we did talk about is a lot of the data, video data in particular, that came from the red snapper project. How valuable would that be, maybe along the lines of what you're talking about, if you're looking at a certain year in terms of developing that absolute abundance estimate? Julie, Brian, and also saw Laura. Julie Lively joined after we did the introduction. Julie, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Sorry. Julie Lively. I'm the fishery specialist for Louisiana Sea Grant.
Julie's on the steering committee. So we didn't talk specifically about that, Sean, but that's something I can ask about.
So LaDon, just to follow up on Sean's point, the red snapper count effort, you know, counted a lot of red snapper, but encountered a lot of amberjacks and other things as well. And so I honestly think it would be very useful to have some kind of a retrospective on the, you know, they say the cheapest data you're ever going to get is the data you already have, right? And so, you know, it'd be a shame not to at least figure out what we learned from that effort, you know, that might be relevant to this, because it's going to help in the design phase of it.
Yeah, I think everyone agreed that that's something worth pursuing, Steve.
I have one other question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
There are significant numbers of amberjacks in the south part of the Gulf of Mexico, particularly off Mexico and Cuba. And I wonder if there's any provision in here to actually train the Mexicans or the Cubans in this as well.
I think the answer to that, Steve's no, because we were very specific about U.S. waters. That's not to say they couldn't be a co-PI, but as far as going outside the boundaries of the two regions, there was never any discussion about going down into Mexico, or for that matter, islands off the Florida, like Puerto Rico. It was just along the coast of the South Atlantic and Gulf.
Okay.
I guess I'll ask another one. LaDon, and I haven't studied the RFP close enough yet, but obviously with red snapper, there was a huge match requirement. Is it the same?
Unfortunately, it's still a 30%, Sean.
30% of the total?
Total of your federal request. 30% of your federal request needs to be that match.
So if you ask for the entire 9 million, then you have to come up with 3 million in match.
I think it's 2.7.
2.7. And that can be any normal way that we come up with match: PI salary, reduce indirect,
Correct, yeah.
Hey, Ladon,
Yes, Kevin.
related to that, is equipment provisions, can we use that as match as well?
Devaney, be there. Do you know an answer to that one off the top of your head, or is that something we need to find out?
Ladon, she may not be here because we just had a power failure in our suite, so she might have gotten knocked off somehow.
Kevin,
I'll
let
go see
me,
if-
let me,
if I
let me
can find
find
her.
out about that. That would be something maybe you just ask Devaney, shoot Devaney an email directly.
Okay.
But the
Copy that.
facilities part would be one of the requirements of the proposal. You know, I don't want to say too much because I'm probably wrong. It probably would be on when that equipment was bought. And maybe it could be a share. There's probably, just ask Devaney that question, Kevin, or anyone else that has a question about equipment.
What about some fraction of the cost to acquire extensive existing data used as a match for, as long as it was funded by non-federal entities? Thanks.
Well, to me, in this personal, if you could figure out how to put a dollar value on leveraging existing data, I mean, there is obviously a tremendous value to that. It's just how you quantify how much that's worth.
Yeah, it's well documented what the cost was to acquire it, so it could be, I think it could be done, but you know, I don't know how an auditor would view that, and I assume these matching funds will be subject to audit.
Yes.
Good.
Any questions about the guidance? I know we have, I'm not sure if they're on, but we certainly had some members of the fishing industry who signed on. And there was clearly a statement about engaging with the fishing industry in that. So anyone want to talk about that? Any questions, comments about engaging with the fishing industry?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashford Rosenberg. I'm with the Gulf of Mexico Reef Fish Shareholders Alliance. And thank you so much for hosting this webinar. That's one of the reasons I wanted to sign on today and listen in is, you know, we definitely want to try and find a way to contribute to this study and be a part of it. So if any guidance that you guys have on how we can, you know, engage with you all and be helpful and part of a proposal, we'd very much be interested in that.
In all of our studies, we found participation by the fishing industry to be critical to the success and efficiency of the project. We would certainly be using the industry for logistics support, similar to what we've done in the past.
That's encouraged in the RFP, definitely.
Ladon, this is Marcus. I had a question.
Yes, sir, Marcus.
So reading over the RFP, there was no specific mention of any kind of, you know, outreach or extension or angler engagement or anything of this sort. How is that? How does that factor into this RFP?
There is a little bit of language, Marcus, about you know, it probably is called an outreach plan, even though I feel like it's more of an engagement plan. So it is there.
Well, I guess if I could, I'll rephrase, how will that be factored into the review process if you have any insight into that?
I think if you look at the review criteria, there's something that talks about working with stakeholders. I have the RFP up. I can share that if you hang on a second. I'll share, but it's on page 10 under the guidance, end user involvement. And then under the evaluation section, it's also end users, participants, and co-sponsors. It's 10% of the valuation of the proposal, but that's, I wouldn't say that's misleading because there's a lot of, you can only allocate so much to each of these categories, but I'll say that it's important enough that it's needs to be included in the proposal as well as it's part of the evaluation criteria.
Okay, roger that. So this section should also identify approaches to engage the recreational and commercial fishing sectors and user involvement. Okay. Got it. Thanks, LaDon.
Yep. Yeah, I guess I wish, and again, it's, I think more about the fishing sector. And I'm sure scientists have connections with recreational and commercial fishermen, no doubt about that. But for those who aren't connected already, how do we, how do you go about making yourself known to those groups? Not, that doesn't mean that you'll be part of a proposal, but at least make people aware that you're interested. For those who are involved in the red snapper, I mean, it was one region, even though there's a big difference between east and west in terms of methods and a lot of things, habitat methods, those sorts of things. The one thing that was in the congressional language certainly spoke to the connectivity between the two different stocks. So that's, there's discussion about the genetic side of that as well, movement, and that probably falls under movement. Laura, Julie, Brian, feel free to jump in here if you have anything you'd like to add. I know you have a lot more questions. You're just getting warmed up.
No, the only thing I would add to the engagement with the industry is, we've got Sea Grant contacts Virginia through Texas. So just as far as industry, points of people wanting to get connected, if it is that issue. I know most of the researchers on here already have a lot of those connections, but I know through the RFP website too, it has links to the different Sea Grant programs that are involved with the project too. So if there's opportunities to have us help you guys engage, let us know.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Ryan Slesher. I'm with Mote Marine Laboratory, and we have been working with some commercial anglers to develop a pretty long-term time series of relative abundance through, CPUEs. The RFP is pretty specific about absolute abundance, but we expect that our surveys will continue through the time period that you'd want to assess absolute abundance. So would it be appropriate to propose a study that might relate relative to absolute abundances so that some of these long-term time series could be of value?
I'm not sure I can answer that other than in the RFP, it says any relative abundance needs to be converted to absolute abundance.
Okay.
So Don, Kevin again.
Sure, Kevin.
Another question. So, in the red snapper approach, there was a large proposal. And do you expect this to be different where you receive and ultimately want to fund several smaller proposals? Or are you seeking for one ginormous super team, or has that been discussed?
Oh yeah, we discussed that a lot. And I think at the end of the day that, it's really up, if you look at the goal, I think investigators have to do what they need to do to accomplish the goal. We even talk about if you had a proposal from the South Atlantic and then one from the Gulf, that's fine. But we even discussed how do you connect those two to make sure that, the numbers line up when they do come out. So very well, we could get, and there's some auxiliary priorities that are listed at the end of the guidance that may or may not contribute to that estimate absolute abundance. So yes, we do expect to get some large proposals and probably some small proposals, only touch about it. But the overall goal is that absolute abundance for each of the two regions.
Yeah, the SSC was asked a question at the presentation of the Great Red Snapper count. Well, it was a question regarding a summary of the proposed amberjack study. As where did this request for amberjack study originate? Who was requesting that amberjack be addressed? And no one seemed to have an answer at that time.
Well, I think the way our political system works, that a congressional office hears from someone about a need, and if they hear it from enough people, then it usually gets to appropriations. So that's, stakeholders, constituents of congressional members of Congress evidently heard about this need, and that's what led to the funding through NIMS as well as Sea Grant. If you look at the language, it talks about red snapper, amberjack, and triggerfish. So check on the red snapper, hopefully. We're working on the amberjack. What does that leave? So I don't know what will happen in the future, but there definitely is a lot of interest in the reef fish context. Marcus, I'll go back to you, if I may, go back to your comment about what you might call extension or stakeholder engagement. We had several discussions and ultimately pulled it. I don't know if you heard that Sea Grant's budget was rescinded last night, so hopefully Congress will put that back in. So there is if it is put back in, there is money in the budget for a reef fish extension program. I thought it was for the South Atlantic and Gulf. But it really is only for the Gulf. So that we talked a lot about that in terms of how you leverage that money, because we know this is going to be an expensive proposition here. And if we could find money to cover the extension or the engagements from some other source, that would be ideal. That would leave more money for the research. But right now we couldn't put that language in there, but that may very well happen at some point in the next 2 or 3 months. And that will be something we would communicate to those people who are putting together proposals. And that would be a decision really made by the National Sea Grant Office.
That makes sense. Okay, so just essentially stay tuned for upcoming details about that if they emerge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Roger.
While we're waiting on other questions, Loretta, I don't know if Devin got back on, but Loretta, do you have any comments about the submission process that you want to go over?
No, just advise people to register early, and if they have any issues at all registering, I'm always very quick to respond to problems with that, and I can help, and we usually get any problems resolved pretty quick. And I think Devaney's trying to call in, but we're definitely having some electric issues right now in the suite, so I don't know what's going on.
It's Friday. A question you may have, based on what we learned, what I learned, what everyone else learned, and I know the people working on the project, to do this in 2 years is difficult, but that's kind of where it has to be 2 years. But you probably know we're pretty generous with extensions if they're justified. And it's not too hard to justify some of those.
I've got a question, LaDon.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just wondering about the relationship between the RFP, the letter of intent and the final proposals. Are you expecting that in the letter of intent, we'll have figured out and done the matchmaking, to essentially describe the entire thing? Is that what you're expecting, to have the partnerships defined in 3 weeks?
No, William, I don't think that's possible. We even discussed, well, what happens if they want a PI wants to add co-PIs, that's allowable. That's actually stated in the RFP, and you can change. I mean, that we don't want to get into that level of management. Kind of the overall vision of what would be proposed is what we're looking for in that letter of intent. It's mentioned that those won't be reviewed. That's mainly just to get a handle on how many reviewers we're going to need for the full proposal. What I would say, if you decide to pull out after submitting the letter of intent, it would be really good that you let us know. And we'll probably send that in a follow-up email to everyone who submits a letter of intent.
And I guess as a follow-up, will you be sharing, for example, who submitted RFP letters of intent? As we all struggle to do this matchmaking, it'd be nice to know who submitted and maybe something about what they said.
My gut reaction would be no. That's probably not something we can do. I struggle with how you let people know that, hey, this is a group over here that's working on this area. And you're working in this area. It just makes sense if you two work together. That might happen. We might at least acknowledge that, but just to share who all's working on, who all submitted letters of intent, probably won't be able to do that. Can overall, will PI be switched between the L and full proposal stage? If yes, can you change the lead? Let me get back to you on that one, Will. So the question was, if you can't see it, is can the overall project PI be switched between the letter of intent and full proposal stage? If yes, can you change the lead institution as well? It was clearly stated that you could add co-PIs. We didn't discuss changing PIs altogether or even changing lead institution.
Is there a limit on the number of letters that can be submitted by any one institution?
No. Sorry, I'm taking a couple of notes here, but I'm listening.
LaDonna, I had an idea. We might be able to provide a checkbox in Sea Grant where people can check it if they're okay with sharing that they've submitted a letter of intent with others so that there can be more collaboration. That was just a thought.
We can certainly talk about that. We're a strong believer in confidentiality, and that's my only concern.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying if we put a checkbox saying that you're okay with us sharing it, then yeah, that's where I'm coming from too. The confidentiality is a concern.
Yeah, I don't know how people felt in the Red Snapper, and it's, I'm not going to reference Red Snapper because that was only one group of people, but I did see value in having those workshops because some of that matchmaking we're talking about kind of happened out in the hallways. during those workshops. That just wasn't allowed this time.
So Ladon, on the Red Snapper RFP, it had some specific language about the federal involvement.
Mhm.
And essentially that the intent of that appropriation was that it be independent of NOAA. So we could have federal partners, but they couldn't receive money, is what I understood that to mean. Is that the same for this partnership?
It is, Sean. They can be unfunded collaborators. Devaney, are you on? I saw a phone number dial in. Just give me a yes, because we had a question. I was hoping you might be able to answer.
She might be muted. I hear her.
Hey, LaDon, the phone number may be me. It's Kelly.
Hey, Kelly, sorry. Well, do you mind if I ask you a question that was asked of us? And
you can ask.
okay. Someone asked about the possibility of using equipment as match. And I deferred that to Devaney, but Devaney, they lost power in the office, so I can't ask her.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to get back on that.
Devaney is currently on the phone with our power people.
Is there an option to create a matchmaking group in your forum? You know, Rachel, first thing that comes to mind, I guess we could, how would you do that? I'm thinking like some social media thing. I don't know of another. That's a good question. Someone smarter than me with social media or something like that should probably jump in and answer that. I know I'm part of some private fishing groups, not lawbreakers, so don't get that wrong idea, but that's probably could be done. It's just how you then invite people to join that or make them aware of it.
I mean, LaDon, would it be appropriate if, people that were interested in collaborating or finding that matchmaking avenue, just sharing like our emails and contact information in the chat? Would that be helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Hi, yes, I have a question.
Yes, sir, Chris.
Is there the possibility for a partial proposal to be funded if that part of the proposal meets the needs?
I think it's possible.
Okay. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Chris, I'm not saying it would be done without maybe revisions. There's probably would be a very good reason a team of reviewers and a technical review panel said, this is worthy of being funded, but this isn't.
Okay. Would it be beneficial to maybe if you have multiple ideas, put in multiple letters of intent? I wouldn't want to flood the gates or anything like that and just send in a whole bunch of proposals if we can get it all knocked out in one, but would it be beneficial to do separate ideas and one whole idea?
you're welcome to do that. All I ask would be, and we definitely want to, when we respond to the letters of intent, ask that people let us know as soon as they can whether they're going to pursue full proposals on those. So yes, so you're welcome to submit multiple letters of intent.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, since one of the reasons why we ask for letters of intent is to provide information for the review process, it's useful to know, if you've changed how you're going to go about it and things like that. So we know how many to expect and what the topics are.
Thank you.
Hey, LaDon and Loretta, there seem to be several questions for which there's not a clear answer or it's an unknown at this point. Are you guys going to have like an online forum where these answers are posted, or will you email them out? I mean, how will you get that information to folks?
Yeah, we could put a Q&A on the website, Will. You're the equipment will be able to answer. Kevin sends an email, we can answer that. The question you asked about changing PIs or changing institutions, if you read the RFP, there's no provision to do that. So the first answer will be no. What I'm going to do is confirm that is a no answer.
Hey, LaDon, it's Kelly.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you have the answer to that. Yes,
It does look like equipment would be allowable match. I will do a double check next week to see if there's anything else folks who want to offer that should consider. But my general guidance would be, if you have a fiscal officer or somebody, a resource to check in with in terms of federal budgetary guidelines to CFR 200, that would be good, just to make sure if you're offering that, you're offering it in compliance with our standards. But I would expect that it's much the same as if you were requesting funds for equipment in your budget, doing the same type of justification, explaining why the equipment is necessary for the completion of the project to justify it being used as match. But I will get back to you, LaDon, probably Wednesday, when I have a chance to talk with other program officers to confirm that, unless Stephanie has a definitive answer for you sooner than that. Does that help?
Yeah, that whole CFR 200, is that what it is? I know you
CFR 200, yep.
I'm sure y'all have that committed to memory just like I do, but thank goodness we have people who do. But your sponsored programs office should be able to help with that one.
Yep.
Kelly, if I may ask you another one. One of the questions was about, in the RFP, it talks about you can add co-PIs, you can change co-PIs after you submit a letter of intent. But the question was asked, can a letter of intent, well, maybe what I understood you say, could the letter of intent be submitted and then during the full proposal, the PI change altogether?
Yeah, so the idea here is if you have assembled a team and have a project idea, the team more or less stays the same. The project idea and scope stays the same, but for whatever reason, maybe due to other commitments, the overall PI, there's a desire to switch that, between members of the team. And I'm just asking if that's allowed. If you have the idea in and the scope in, and basically the team stays the same, could you switch the overall PI? I mean, these proposals aren't being routed through research offices.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Good. Glad we got
Thank you.
So Will, are you talking about elevating maybe a co-PI up to a PI level? Is that what you're?
Yes. Yeah, that as an example.
All right, good. All right, we got that answer. I have 151. All I know is I'm going deer hunting in 2 hours, so I can stay on that much longer.
I think you've done such a good job explaining it, Ladon. We're all silenced.
Well, I don't mean to silence anyone, but you can shoot me an email and I'll follow up in a very timely fashion. Kelly, if you're on, I'll try to get one other question answered. Or at least, if you can't,
Okay.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Someone asked about who has, it clearly states that the PI needs to be from a university within one of the coastal states within the geography. A question was asked about, does an adjunct appointment qualify as a faculty? Would they be eligible to submit a proposal as a PI? Any thoughts on that one, Kelly?
I don't see why not.
We're being recorded.
I don't think we've ever made any distinction about, type of affiliation with the university. I think it would matter more that the sponsored programs office at the university allows the adjunct to serve in that capacity.
That was pretty much the answer I gave.
That is a happy coincidence.
Oh, I wasn't testing you. I didn't know for sure. Never had that question asked.
Yeah, I haven't either, but we don't speak to that in any regard. So I don't think that is an issue for us.
Yeah, there's no big reveal at the very last 2 minutes here. This is not, it's not the election where they're going to zero out anything in the 11:59. So, I don't have any more, but again, I appreciate you getting on. The goal was here is just try to do what we did, was to answer some questions that probably weren't clearly stated in the RFP. But Will, I think that's a good idea. I will take these questions. We'll confirm these answers and we'll put them on the website as well. It's not going to happen today though. Probably the first of the week.
Sounds good. Happy hunt, Ladon.
Yep.
Appreciate it, Don. You guys have a good one. Everybody have a good weekend.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a great weekend.
You take care, everybody. Thanks, Ladon.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.